Moving on now, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is set to lead a delegation of officials for a tour of the Pacific region and make a stop-off at the Solomon Islands ahead of the federal election. Joining us live now is Gordon Flake, the CEO of the Perth USAsia Centre. Gordon, appreciate your time. Just how significant is this visit by Wang Yi to the Solomons, and should we here in Australia be reading too much into the timing of it just before an Australian federal election in which, as we all know, this China-Solomons Pact has really been a consistent issue?
Yeah, I'm not so sure I would read the timing of the visit into our own domestic politics. I've seen scant evidence that the Chinese foreign minister's schedule is determined by our election schedule. But having said that, it is a very significant development. We paid a lot of attention just over a month ago when the U.S. Indo-Pacific Czar, the deputy assistant to the president in the National Security Council, Kurt Campbell, visited. So to have somebody of the level of seniority of the Chinese foreign minister visiting, it will certainly highlight the concerns that Australia has, that the United States have, and that the rest of the members of the Pacific Island Federation have about the trajectory of the current president of the Solomon Islands and their relationship with China.
We're not the only ones in election mode. I know that you've been watching the Philippines election from afar. China, no doubt, watching it really closely as well. Could the election there be good for China?
That's hard to say. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find a political leader that was more unpredictable, but in that process of being unpredictable, more kind of anti-U.S., pro-China than the previous president, Duterte. Now that we've got Marcos back in, the Marcos family back in, there is some indications that he will be more skeptical in his approach to China and certainly more favorable towards the United States. There is no question, however, that if you look at countries like Korea that had an inauguration yesterday, or the Philippines, which had the election earlier this week, they're very much targets of contestation for influence, where the United States and China are both seeking to influence elections. Remember, the Philippines remains a treaty ally of the United States. And my anticipation is that regardless of his political leanings, a new Marcos presidency will likely be much more focused on maintaining those more traditional security alliances like with the United States.
Yeah, a number of leadership changes around the region at the moment. A former security chief is the new leader in Hong Kong. What does that signal, do you think, about Hong Kong's future direction?
Well, nothing good. Obviously, we wouldn't advisedly use the term election, but rather selection in terms of that process. But more importantly, not just his selection, but the immediate actions taking place afterwards. The arrest of a 90-year-old, longstanding dissident, former Catholic cardinal. It really sends the message that there is more of the same, which is more continuing crackdown on domestic dissent, on things that made Hong Kong under this national security law that was so controversial 2 years ago, but at this point, which seems to be a lost cause for the people of Hong Kong.